When I was a kid, the only access I ever had to gaming was either through arcades or by sometimes getting a turn at playing on my cousin's consoles. That means I only had access to what they had, and as time went on, there were franchises I ended up missing out on big time, like Rayman. My relationship with the Rayman franchise is weird, to say the least. Most of it comes from external media, or even from catching the occasional meal from back in the day. The closest I got to play the games was the Raving Rabbids game on the Wii, and even I can admit that one was more of a minime game compilation. So you can imagine how happy I am that today, I finally get to talk about Rayman Origins, a game that, despite having a bit of false advertisement in its name, is nonetheless one of the best platformers I have played in a while. But in order to explain why I believe that, let's get started with what little bases there are. Rayman Origins puts you behind the floating limbs of Rayman and his friends. From what I had to read, because the game has virtually no dialogue, they were supposed to be watching the entrance to the land of the living dead. But because they were all busy sleeping and lazing around while causing some catchy music, the noise invoked the wrath of said underworld. Now, with the Glade of Dreams taken over by the nightmares and other evils, it's up to Rayman and his friends to journey across the Glade, rescue the Princess Princesses, and so on. At least that's what I was able to put together from rewatching the cutscenes and reading the wiki, but more on that later. True to the genre, the objectives of Origins are part of the course for any other platformer. You have to make it from point A to point B and grab collectibles. What immediately stuck to me with this one, however, was two things. First, that some of the levels move alongside you. And second, all of the levels use the themes of the respective worlds to its full potential. A good example for the first one is in the early jungle levels. There are bits where the land is either unstable or is being moved by water, keeping it in constant motion, or in other places, there are plants that are there to harm you, but in turn, you can use them against your enemies. An example of the latter is levels like the music world or the water world. In the music world, there is a consistent design of using instruments for the platforming, and also leading to the segments and set pieces that made me realize, I love this game. I have a soft spot for platformers that have levels full of hazards, and you have to know how to maneuver around them via hovering. There is just something both tense and relaxing about it, and I guess it's also part of why I came to love that from the old Donkey Kong games. The key to great gameplay in platformers comes down to both the level design and the fluidity of the controls. What this game does is that the controls are so good that you can end up completing these levels in 3 different ways thanks to replayability. You can find yourself just going from point A to point B like I said earlier. The second run is to actually take your time to look for secrets and collectibles, something this game has in spades. And finally, the speedrun mode, which is self-explanatory. Let's talk about the collectibles for now. To 100% complete each level, you need 3 things. First, you need to collect a specific number of lumps. The amount varies depending on how long the level is, but most levels will allow you to collect 350. Collecting is not enough, of course. True to the fluidity of the gameplay, lumps are missable. Sometimes they'll be in bubbles that float away, and if you're not fast enough, they can either end up out of your reach entirely or just fade away. So you got a little challenge where you want to nail each jump in order to get to them. Reaching the goal in turn will give you 2 Electoons, these pink little creature orb things that apparently are in charge of connecting you with other worlds. Aside from the end of each level, there is usually 2 more Electoons hidden in each one. And this brings another layer of fun. Each Electoon room is essentially a platforming puzzle. They're not too complicated, in fact some of them you can straight up break sequence by aiming at the correct enemies, but every one of them is unique in their own way. There are no repeat rooms, and that is amazing. The good thing is, there actually is a purpose for getting all the collectibles, especially the Electoons. They help you unlock new worlds, they open access to the treasure chase levels, more on that in a moment, and they also unlock customs for Rayman and his friends. And I do have a little problem with said customs, but let's put a pin on it for now, because I want to talk about the treasure chases. They are this game's version of, say, the lost levels in Donkey Kong. They are the hardest level in each of the 10 worlds. They are what I consider a test. They test your gameplay skills up to that point, and the further you advance into the game, the more hard they get, and I love them. But why would I love what some will consider a difficulty spike, you may ask? That's because if there is something I'm often looking for in my games, is to make sure that any mistake that happens anytime I get stuck in an area is because of my own lack of skill and not because the game is pulling a fast one on me. The treasure chases are amazing because once you get the handle of the rhythm of each obstacle, you start to feel extremely satisfied when you finally pull it off. And all of it makes sense once you get in the rhythm of it, to the point you don't even get scared or start choking just as victory is within your reach. But with how much I am praising this game, there sure has to be one downside, right? I only have 2 things to point out, and I'm sure if I will count them as negatives because they didn't really harm my experience, but they are still oddities worth pointing out. Remember how I said the electrons you collect can get you costumes? There are 3 playable characters between Rayman, his friend Globox, and the TNCs. You will think that the number of costumes available will be evenly distributed between the 3. That is not the case. Over 3/4 of the costumes are TNCs. Now, granted, each TNC is apparently a separate character with their own lore, but did they really need to take over the entire costume department? I guess the reason it strikes me as odd is because you would think Rayman, the titular character, will be the one to get the most costumes. I will admit the TNCs ended up growing on me though. What also did take some time getting used to was realizing the title of this game is misleading. With Origins, you will think this is some kind of prequel, like a new start for Rayman. It's nothing like that. There was apparently an entire story planned out with dialogue and cutscenes, but it got scrapped, and instead we got a standard wacky adventure. Not that I have any problem with it. Of all the things I would look for in a platformer, story is certainly way at the bottom of my list of priorities. While I did need to look up some lore on the wiki and read in the flavor text for each costume, the game still has a fun little story going on, one that is told with barely any words. I won't spoil it, but basically there are reasons for everything happening around you. From how Rayman and his friends somehow managed to earn the wrath of the living dead, to an explanation as to why most tutorials are told from a hat lying on the floor. And even if you don't notice the atmosphere, you do end up noticing the personality. So much of it. This game pulls off the kind of atmosphere I come to expect from classics like Donkey Kong, where you can enjoy the wacky silliness of a forest adventure, to the relaxing and yet threatening calmness of the ocean levels. To the hot and spicy Mexican vibe of the fire world, and so on. Before I talk about one last thing, I think I also need to comment on this game's pacing. One testament to great game design is when a game is paced in a way that your skill level goes up along with your own progress in the game. The first 5 worlds serve as a way to get you accustomed to the skills you've been unlocking and get a handle on the platforming challenges themselves. Once you complete them, the second half of the game unlocks and it can be completed in any order you want. Why? Because now you have learned what you need and can put it to good use. The second half also ramps up the challenge in such a fun way, it actually feels natural. And all of this then gets capped off with some pretty amazing boss fights. I really love the bosses in this game. While all of them usually follow the classic 3-hit formula, they lean more into the set-piece challenge kind of thing. You have to learn patterns, know when to dodge, and when the opportunity presents itself, strike the seemingly autonomous weak spot. It's ridiculous, and it's the kind of boss fights that take me all the way back to the classics that made my childhood. So to avoid talking in circles, I think I made my point. Rayman Origins may be one of the best platformers I have played in years. I regret so much I didn't get around to play this sooner, and it disturbs me that the game is 13 years old when I clearly remember when it was new, and even a friend will use it as background gameplay for his videos. I'm getting old, and it is giving me serious existential dread. Either way, this game scratches all the right itches for what I want in a platformer, and it excites me to hear the sequel is even better. And if you're like me among the few who haven't played it, please give it a go. At least when it's still available, because Ubisoft sucks and they love delisting games, but that's a topic for another day. In the meantime, there is just something amusing about Origin's entire existence. The title may have ended up being irrelevant and misleading, but with how cartoony and wacky Rayman has always been, it ended up into the charm. It's the kind of silliness that reminds me why, as much as I love me some lore and cutscenes in my games, nothing beats dedicating most of my experience to some good old-fashioned gameplay.